very warm welcome to all of you. This is Business Today, your weekly business roundup brought to you exclusively on Channel I. And we are ready to start yet another episode of Business Today, where we bring you business personalities, talk about what's going on in the Colombo Stock Exchange, and also we have a sector discussion towards the latter part of our program. So with all that, we will start our program and we will move on to business personality segment. And we will connect with the introduction clip.
Is the Director and Chief Executive Officer of First Capital Holdings PLC. Mr. Dilshan Veerasekara successfully completed his executive professional education at INSEAD Business School in France. He was the former General Manager of SoftLogic Capital PLC and Head of Treasury at Nations Trust Bank PLC. He has over 22 years experience in banking, treasury, investment management, capital market strategy, and corporate finance advisory.
Yes, and he is Mr. Dilshan Veerasekara, and he is the Chief Executive Officer of First Capital Holding PLC, and he's also Director of Colombo Stock Exchange. A very good evening to you.
Good evening, Isanga.
Right, so first, can we talk about First Capital and the business the company is involved in?
Sure. So First Capital today stands as one of the fully fledged leading investment banks in Sri Lanka.
One of the oldest.
One of the oldest as well, and we are very proud of that fact. The company was formed in the early 80s, venturing into the capital markets as a money broking firm, and then little by little adding bits and pieces of the various businesses. So we were the first licensee as a primary dealer by the Central Bank of Sri Lanka in 1994, and then ventured into the government securities market through that license. A little later onwards, we added on asset management to our forte, again license regulated by the Securities and Exchange Commission of Sri Lanka, and today we have over 5 unit trusts and private wealth management portfolios that we manage under that business. We also have a stockbroking arm, which is a trading member of the Colombo Stock Exchange. By virtue of that, I sit on the Colombo Stock Exchange board. And we also have our debt structuring, corporate finance advisory work, where we do a lot of debt structuring and placement for the NBFI sector, for the SME sector, for the general corporates of Sri Lanka, as well as advisory in terms of valuations and various other assignments. So the company's really evolved over the last 35 years, starting from simple roots, but essentially then adding on the bits and pieces to today stand as a fully fledged investment bank and the only listed investment bank in the Colombo Stock Exchange as of now.
Okay, you just mentioned that you're the only listed investment bank. What does it really mean, and what difference does it make to our clients?
So I mean, being listed is, I think, in one sense of it, allows the public to actually have a stakeholding in the company. So by virtue of being publicly listed, any ordinary person can buy a share in the company and take part in our ownership structure. It also entails a lot of, I would say, transparency, because your financials to everything that you do needs disclosure to your shareholders and the general public. It also adds a lot of responsibility in terms of governance standards that you have to adhere to being a listed entity, as well as, I think,
more credibility.
The credibility, and also in terms of the board of directors who essentially manage the company also need to be of very high standing as a public quoted entity. So I think it just adds to the transparency and the governance of the institution that is obviously then going to benefit all its stakeholders.
Right, so when we talk about investment banking, this particular segment has not evolved much and developed much in Sri Lanka. What do you think are the reasons behind this?
So there are, I mean, I would say multitude of reasons. You can't really pinpoint on one, but let me start off maybe just giving you a few in my opinion. I think as a nation, we probably lack a proper understanding and education in this segment, in this sector. For example, investment banking products and services are not well known amongst the general public. Sri Lankans are a nation of savers, but unfortunately very conventional in their thinking that most of the savings are channeled to the banking, the traditional sector, which is the banking sector. And to me, really, I think that's probably the biggest factor that people really don't know much about the products and services. But also, if you look at how that sector effectively reflects the economy as a whole at large, I think therein self lies a fundamental issue. So if you take our stock market, for example, essentially that should reflect the GDP of this nation. Right. If you have most of the companies that partake in that activity being listed on the stock exchange. Unfortunately, we have close to 300 companies listed. However, if you compare it, I think it's the entire market capitalization of the Colombo Stock Exchange is little under 16 billion US dollars, right, or about 2.7 trillion rupees, which is only a little less than, or little maybe ballpark around 20% of our country's GDP. So that's an issue. So you're not really reflecting the entire economy in that sector. If you compare it to the region like Malaysia or to Singapore, I mean, it's in the 70-80%. In some countries, it even goes as high as 100%. So I think a combination of these factors, on one side, the knowledge factor, and on one side, the fact that you don't have total representation, are probably the two biggest issues that have really held back, people really partaking in investment banking products and services.
Definitely, but if you look at the current context, what sort of opportunities are available in the market for new entrants and for existing companies?
So there is, I would say, a whole gamut of opportunities. So if you look at, really, I think the entire market caters to all investors, starting from retail, who might be fairly small in nature, to high net worth individuals, to even corporates or multinational companies doing much larger deal sizes. So I think the products and services really cater to every need that there is out there. Right. So if you're, we'll say, an individual who's just looking to save some money, I think most of us only know a savings account or a fixed deposit as options to go and put your money in. But there are various other instruments. So within even the same risk categorization of saying, okay, look, I want a fixed return. I need to know if I put X amount of money, I will get Y at maturity. There are products that will satisfy that need. So you have fixed income securities. They could be corporate debt instruments. They could be government securities. You call them fancy names, but it's essentially an instrument that gives you a fixed rate of return. You have many such of these instruments that are available. And if you're a little bit more of a risk taker, looking at much longer term durations, wanting maybe put aside savings for a much longer period, your pension plan, or we'll say your kids' education, you can always look at equity, investing in shares of a company. That is more risky, that earnings are more volatile, but on a long-term basis, I think give far better sustained returns. So you have a gamut of products and services that cater to every need. If you're a corporate and you have certain exposures as a result of your business, whether it be exchange rate volatility or let it be interest rate volatility, you have particular derivative instruments that are out there that can hedge your risk. So I think the products and services are there, but really what lacks is the knowledge. The knowledge and the access. And the access to some extent, yes, I do agree.
Right, so any particular sectors that you see booming in the short term and the medium term?
Tough question. So let me start off with, I mean, it's tough to really find a single sector that you could really be bullish on. So let me just maybe give you a little bit of a overall view first before I pick my favorite sector. The country itself is having fairly moderate economic growth. So we are, over the last maybe year and a half, we've fallen down below 4% in terms of our GDP growth. So it's not that great. Obviously, all these sectors get affected. Within that, I think we've had issues with agriculture because of certain weather patterns. You know, we've gone through floods and drought cycles again over the last 18 to 24 months. That has impacted that sector. I think if you look at the services sector, that's relatively doing well. Within that, banking, finance, insurance is something that has shown sustained growth, shown a lot of resilience, and kept on growing. Construction, we've seen having periods of sort of, you know, periods of boom, but then sort of slowing down again now, with also the government not spending as much as they used to with regard to infrastructure. And these factors sort of, you know, affect all of that. But one particular sector that I really am quite bullish on, and I feel that really is where Sri Lanka can make a difference and really achieve rapid economic growth, is tourism. And why I say that is, I think if you just stack up the numbers, it's probably the one industry that we can really scale up in terms of size, revenue, to achieve long-term growth. So Sri Lanka right now attracts about 2.5 million tourists a year. If you look at that, during the war period or just after post-war, it was just less than 500,000 tourists. So we've, you know, it's grown 5 times over the last 8 to 9 years. And if you look at the region, if you take countries like Malaysia, countries like Thailand, they have 40 million plus tourists visiting them a year. So scalability compared to that, if we can even double our tourist arrivals, you're talking of doubling your earnings. So that's something that I feel that from a scaling point of view is one sector that we can really do well in.
Right, so in terms of treasury bills and bond yields, so we've seen an upward trend during the past couple of months. So what are your predictions here?
Well, so I think if you look at a couple of factors, there is a rising trend in interest rates globally. And it's essentially coming through the US economy, also doing pretty well. And the Federal Reserve Bank hiking rates or US interest rates, which sort of sets a benchmark for everyone else to sort of follow. Now, as a result of these interest rate hikes by the Federal Reserve Bank, we've seen certain investment flows that have been coming into this region moving out because they can now get better dollar returns. So people are questioning as to, should you be in emerging markets when interest rates are rising in the US? And that has actually resulted in capital outflows from even the Sri Lankan market that has, I would say, initially impacted rates to move up. Recently, we've seen liquidity issues, mainly resulting again from foreign outflows, where the current market actually is fairly significant amount is in deficit. So we have about a 85 billion shortfall in our banking system right now, with central bank having to pump in liquidity to manage that situation. So that has further exaggerated this upward trend in rates. And very recently, just this week, we saw central bank hike its policy rates by 0.5%. And if you read through their monetary policy statement, again, it's a more precautionary measure to ensure that we can keep the things in check. So all those, a combination of these factors have actually resulted in the yields move up. Unfortunately, the political atmosphere that currently prevailing is not helping that situation and sort of has exaggerated, in my opinion, rates to move up. So to answer your question, I don't have a magic crystal ball that can tell me where rates go. But I think if you look at how things have progressed, we've seen the yield curve shift by about almost 2.5% over the last 2 months.
Right.
And I think that probably is appropriate for now.
Right.
And my expectation is that rates will probably remain at these levels, and hopefully maybe with better economic prospects, better improvement
Right.
on the fiscal side, that it might actually start tapering down next year. But a lot is yet
Let's
remains
keep
to be
our
seen.
fingers
Yeah.
crossed, yes. So going back to First Capital being one of the oldest investment banks in Sri Lanka, can you talk about its key milestones?
Sure. So I think early part of 2013, we acquired our stockbroking arm, which sort of completed our investment banking products and services that we wanted to have the fully encompass all the products and services that an investment bank could have. And with that, I think we also looked at how could we be innovative in terms of taking products and services out there. How could we customize our products and services to suit our clients' requirements? So that has always been sort of how we look at doing business. So we really go to our clients and say, what are the issues you have? What are the problems you have? What do you need to do? And then try and find the innovative way to sort of structure it. So if you look at over the last 5 years, which is really my tenure in this company, we've done a couple of firsts for investment banking and the market. A few memorable transactions that I can recall. We did the first AAA rated debenture, listed debenture on the stock exchange by a company that didn't have a good credit rating. We did that by actually getting a development financial institution based overseas to guarantee that instrument and list it on the stock exchange. So it was actually not only the first debenture to be guaranteed by overseas fund, it was also the first listed rated AAA that came out to the market. We've done that. We've done also the first insurance company guaranteed debenture. There again, a lot of people here, insurance companies underwriting risk, which is, against natural disasters or your life or medical. Here we actually have insurance company underwriting credit risk of an issuer. So how do you get other participants to really come and help capital market development? So that's one transaction we are very proud of, where we got an insurance company to guarantee debt issued by another company and essentially list it on the stock exchange. We came out with again a product simplifying government security investments. Treasury bonds are instruments that the government issues for long-term financing. These are fairly complicated from a layman's perspective to understand. So a lot of people, okay, how does my return come? So you have coupons, you have a discounted amount you invest, it could be premium, your valuations change every day when yields change. So people really don't understand this. People sort of are averse to the fact of investing just because I don't really clearly understand the product. We packaged it in a way and we called it a platinum bond, effectively making it a deep discounted instrument backed by government securities. So any layman could understand, if you invest X, I get Y at maturity. That's something we had a lot of success with that we've done. We've also done, I think, securitizations. These are mainly for non-banking financial institutions who look at raising financing by pledging part of their lending portfolio. We did a first with regard to microfinance backed securitizations. We've also sort of put out there a mobile application that's out there that gives you real-time information into capital markets. So whether it's stock exchange or bond prices or unit trusts or whatever, we have an app that actually gives you real-time data to check how your investments are faring. So those are a couple of milestones I can.
Great, and you've got many firsts in your lists,
Yes.
But on the other hand, commercial banks also provide these services, same services.
Sure.
So what sort of competition do you face in the market, and how do you handle competition there?
So competition is pretty stiff. I think more so we have essentially, I think, about 5-6 institutions who mirror us in terms of products and services, fully fledged investment banks out there. We also have a couple of sort of niche players who look at specific sectors in these areas. So they might not do the entire investment banking products, but they might just focus on asset management or debt structuring. So there's a fair amount of competition, in my opinion. Commercial banks really, I think, are more sort of in the taking deposits versus lending, giving out loans model. And how we like to be different is we like to think of ourselves as enabler for financial disintermediation. So it's how can you really put the investor and the investee together, essentially taking on the risk of the investee company or the borrower, but also then seeking higher returns. So you're taking away that middleman and disintermediating between the two entities that effectively should give both parties better returns. So lower cost for the borrower, but also a higher return for the investor. So that's really what we've been trying to push through. But very recently, I think we've seen even the commercial banks now spin off investment banking units within their core banking, because I think they see the investment banks and capital markets maybe eating into their pie, that they are setting up units that they are looking at probably getting, again, more market share through that.
Right, so you're a chief executive officer of a reputed company in Sri Lanka. So as a CEO, what is the most important element you see to drive your business?
So I think it's the people, mostly it's the people. I think, you know, a long time ago I attended this training program where we were asked this question, where a lot of CEOs were asked, you know, if you had to redesignate yourself, what would you call yourself? And it's more, what essentially is your job? Give a description to your job. You know, a CEO is a very technical term of things. And one thing I learned out of that, you know, one of the participants actually said, his purpose is really make people happy. Make the stakeholders happy. So stakeholders meaning, for example, staff who are happy, who have a nice work-life balance, who has a nice culture within the organization, get good rewards, good pay. You have your customers who are just looking and using your products and services, so they need to be of very high quality. Your service standards need to be good. Then is when they will be happy. And then you have your shareholders who are obviously again looking at your profits and your returns. So it's about making all these three segments happy. And I think the role of a CEO really is to be the enabler across these three categories to see how do you keep everyone happy, what do you really need to do to keep your organization on the go. So I think it's about managing people really, and what I try to focus on mostly is that I think at the end of the day, if you keep your clients, your staff and your stakeholders happy, I think you've done a reasonable job.
Great. And before we wind up, I got to ask this question, as you're a person with many years of experience in the banking and finance sector. What is your advice for all the budding investment bankers in Sri Lanka?
So, yeah, I think for anyone choosing a career, I think you really need to be passionate about it. So my advice is really question yourself, is this something that you will enjoy? Is this something that you like doing? And if that answer is yes, I think then is when you really need to think of a career that, okay, this is my career choice. Having made that choice, I think there is obviously at a foundation level a certain educational background that you will need to have. Investment bankers generally deal a lot with numbers, valuations. Sometimes it's very boring work, but you know, accuracy and all that counts a lot. So I think you need to have a good foundation of education that gives you that background, and then it's pure hard work. I think, I mean, that's essentially, I think you put your heart and soul into it, and you work hard. I'm sure you will do well in your career. So that's my
There's
advice.
no other way.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you so much for being with us. It was indeed lovely having you on our show. It was a very interesting and an informative conversation we had with you today.
Thank you for having me here today.
Right. With that,